I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. Let's start with the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with the Sunshine Law notice. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. This meeting is being held in person and through the Zoom meeting platform, being broadcast from Borough Hall, 748 River Road, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this regular council meeting of March 14th, 2022 is available by call-in phone number or through web conference Zoom. Members of the public will be on mute until it's time for questions, comments, which will be announced. At that time, the public has the opportunity to question, comment by phone or through Zoom by the raise hand button. Will be called on at the appropriate time. Notice of this meeting was included in the schedule of meetings, which was adopted by resolution number 2022-13 and sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, the Hub, and the Star Ledger on January 6, 2022, posted on the Borough website, the bulletin board in the municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of the meeting. Allison, may I have a roll call, please?
Council members, Christopher Keith.
Here.
Cole.
Here.
Koch.
Here.
McHugh.
Here.
Matt. Rodriguez.
Here. Okay, we have resolution 2022-70, executive session, personnel and contract negotiations. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Second.
Allison, may I have a roll call?
Council members, Christopher Keith.
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
Koch.
Yes.
McHugh.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes. Thank you. We will now be going into executive session. No formal action will be taken.
So
That's our zero, right?
and 51 just being there. My dad
Teresa and I had this conversation, like in Pennsylvania, they give you points for being a veteran so that it gives you an advantage. It doesn't, they don't take you and just say, okay.
Yeah,
right,
you're right.
right,
I'll be honest with you, some of them used to sign, we'll hire an extra. You know? Tell them we say congratulations. They come from far away too.
you don't have to take you too much.
Allison, how are we looking?
We're good.
We good to go?
She gave you the green light.
We good? All right, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. All right. This meeting was opened at 6:06 p.m. Next order of business is a roll call. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members, Christopher Keith.
Here.
Cole.
Here.
Koch.
Here.
McHugh.
Here.
Matt.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Okay, going into a workshop session, 2022 municipal budget.
Yes, Mayor, as the governing body and some of the public that is here are aware, we did have a discussion on the budget off of the last meeting. I will hit the highlights of where we currently are in the budget. Our general revenues, including the amount raised by taxation, are up $370,513. We are currently within both the appropriation and levy caps. As you recall at our last meeting, we were about $114,000 over the levy cap. At the governing body's direction, I did go back and make suggested edits to the budget, which you have in your current copy. If, as you know, as I put it out in my memo, the ones the fonts in red, I've cut it, and if you click on the cell, you'll see the amount to cut. We are currently under that appropriations cap now by $270. And we can make additions or subtractions from the budget this evening, but keeping in mind that if we make an addition to a line item that's inside the cap, we will have to reduce another inside cap line item because we need to stay under the appropriations cap. We don't have an option. We did utilize all of our 2020 and 21 cap bank to get us under the appropriation cap. Two things, that's why we pass that ordinance every year to give us that option. But really what hurt us this year is that we had 3 interlocals, the custodian interlocal, the QP interlocal, and the animal control interlocal, which are no longer interlocal service agreements. And those items which were out of cap last year had to be moved inside the cap this year. It is important to keep in mind that if we don't cut any additional appropriations to this current budget, you will not have a cap bank available for the 2023 budget except for the $278, which we won't budget help. We are under the levy cap by $57,785. I did give the governing body the Collins cap calculations for your review. Based on our 2022 tentative valuation, a penny now represents $210,643 in Fairhaven. Last year, a penny generated $188,341. This is a result of both added assessments, which is new construction and improvements, as well as the 2022 neighborhood value adjustments made by our tax assessor based on 2021 market data. As you will see in the draft as it currently stands, the initial portion of our tax rate is projected to decrease from 0.405 to 0.374, and that's a decrease of 7.65%. The borough's total valuation is anticipated to increase by approximately 11.84%. This is significantly more than last year's valuation increase, and we'll have that final number once the county tax board does our last tax appeals. The borough's total appropriations budget are increasing the amount of $370,513, which is 3.64%, and our miscellaneous revenues are up by $122,959, which is 4.85%. For the benefit of the public, the governing body knows that appropriations minus revenue equals the amount to raise taxation. In this draft of the budget, the amount raised by taxation is $7,883,482, which is an increase of $247,554 over last year, or 3.24%. The other important thing to keep in mind is we've done two things when it comes to the capital improvement line. As we discussed our last meeting, we have the capital improvement line at $450,000, which is our annual budgeted capital of $215, $35,000 for future bond ordinance down payment is required by law. And we have $200,000 that we actually brought in through the capital line, which is our art money, our American Republic recovery plan money. But that's offset by an equal amount of $200,000 in revenue, which makes it budget neutral. We will get a total of $621,000 in art money over a 3-year period, two-year period. We've allocated $400,000 in reserve to pay capital debt that's been previously authorized and not funded. It's actually a placeholder, a reserve that will help avoid a big lift in future debt services in 2023 and beyond. In 2021, the average residential assessment was $883,800. In 2022, it's up to $989,400 for the average residential assessment in Fairhaven. In this budget, as presently drafted, that conceptual average home will pay a total of $10.08 a month in additional municipal taxes. So I'm going to turn it over to the governing body at this point. I don't know if you want to go through this in any depth, ask questions. Colleen and I are both here to answer anything that you have to ask us.
You may start with me first.
Please.
What is the overall impact, if any, of using all of our cap bank?
Well, as Teresa mentioned, if we use all of it, we didn't have any this year from 2020 because we had used it. So we're using all of 2021. And then for 2022, with doing all of this, it only leaves us 270, which is really nothing. So the issue is that if we go above the allowable appropriation inside cap appropriation next year, we just don't have anywhere to turn for that additional amount. The only way to gain bank is to cut within the cap this year. We could bank some of that. Even if we did that, we went above and beyond it. I have inquired about that just to find out, and our process would be, we'd have to make applications to the local finance board at the state and get approval to go beyond the appropriation cap.
Is, as a matter of practice, is there some preferred approach for dealing with the cap bank? Do you typically want to use it, or do you typically want to preserve it?
I mean, you know, in your ideal situation, you have it for both. You know, you have enough that you can use it for, you know, the budget that you're currently doing, but there's some remaining that, you know, you'll have for future budgets. I mean, having no appropriation cap bank is not ideal. But I don't know, you know, this year we're using, I believe it was 70,000 from the bank last year, no, 80,000. So I mean, if you wanted to have the same thing available, it's a matter of cutting $80,000 within the cap.
And is there, just so I want to make sure I'm understanding, you know, how the using all of the cap bank impacts, does it have any impact on surplus or ability to use surplus if we need to?
No,
It's just a matter of the increase.
right.
Okay. So it kind of handcuffs, I shouldn't say handcuffs, but it puts
I mean,
an
typically-
artificial barrier in place.
Yeah. I
There's
mean-
less wiggle room, I should say, next year.
And typically, I mean, I want to say typically, but obviously we haven't had that in the past couple of years here. The appropriation cap is usually not a problem. It's usually more the levy cap we're focusing on.
Mhm.
But because Fairhaven does do so many shared services, you know, some are in, some are out, you're bringing them out, you're bringing them in. You've had a lot of that going on. And I think now we're just seeing, this just happened to be a year where we got hit with 3 of them going back inside the cap.
Right.
And that, you know, that kind of hurt us a little bit.
That impacts our, right, that increase.
Mhm.
Okay, so that next year, we probably wouldn't see something like that because there wouldn't be things coming back inside the cap that if we're a little insulated.
Right, I mean, I would have to, you know, look to Teresa to that to see if we think, if there's any of the shared services that we currently participate with, if we think there's any chance they're gonna, you know, be dissolved and we're gonna bring services back in-house.
Yep.
Then yeah, we'd have to consider that.
Okay, this is more of a Teresa question.
Can I have a follow-up on it? Because
Sure.
I
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
want
let's
to
stay on
clarify the
topic.
same thing.
Yeah.
Do you think what we're doing is the best approach? Is there a suggested better approach that you would recommend?
This is, there's not a suggested better approach. I mean, it's just where we are. It's a matter of, if you would want to have some bank there as a cushion,
Right.
then you have to look at this budget, the things that are inside of cap, and say, okay, what can we reduce? What can we cut? And then it gives us some bank for next year. That's, you know, that's really, it's a very simple thing. I mean, would I prefer to have bank? Of course I would. You know, you know, it's just like a reserve for us, or, you know, whatever. I don't like to not have something set to the side, but the reason you have the bank is for years like this where you need to use them. So it's kind of, you have to decide, you know, what we want to do. You know, if you want to say, listen, we don't want to be down to $270, we prefer to have 25, 50, whatever it might be,
Right.
then we'd have to look at the budget again and come up with some cuts that would allow us that bank.
Teresa, do you see anything on the horizon that's gonna?
I don't anticipate any of our interlocal agreements, you know, being discontinued between, you know, next year. But, you know, I don't have any, a crystal ball. I mean, we've done fairly well in interlocal agreements, and we might even come up with some, you know, during the year that we did anticipate that would move something that's inside a cap, outside of cap. But, you know, you know, this is a solid budget. You know, could you say to us, go back in and come up with, I mean, I take anybody's suggestions, we want to come up with some additional inside the cap cuts, but there's not a lot of, you know, you'd have to go into departments and either return them to actuals for last year, or really, if you want to come up with something substantial like $50,000, it's not as easy as saying, oh, we'll just use more surplus. That's not going to help us. This is, we have to cut items in this budget that you're looking at that are inside of cap.
If if appropriations actually come in under what we are projecting, then we have that available within the cap. No.
No, the
Once
cap
it's
is
written-
based on what we adopt. So
Right.
that's, and then
Okay.
what happens is the
What hap-
state does a calculation. It says, okay, you could have gone up to this, but you only went to that. Here's your bank for this year. That's it. They don't care about what you actually.
What the actual is, okay.
So any money that's not used in appropriations would go back into reserve, would go into the cap bank.
Right, that goes, eventually appropriations that aren't used lapse into surplus,
Right.
which is on the revenue side of the budget.
Mhm.
That more comes into play when you're talking about the levy cap.
Right,
With the appropriations cap, this is strictly on the spending side of your budget.
so you couldn't use it.
Teresa, I had a question specifically for you in appropriations. I see one of the proposed cuts was to the fire department. Or I guess I should say more broadly, any of the cuts. Do any of them have any sort of significant impact on those departments, and or have you discussed any of those cuts with the department heads?
No, these are my suggested cuts, and in all honesty, I felt fairly strong that when I did them, I looked at actuals from last year, and I looked where we saw a big jump, and if there was a big jump for whatever reason, then I cut it.
Okay, yeah, I guess my question would be like, obviously there's inflation, there's, cost increases for things. Is that gonna impact? I can't remember if it was specific, I'm looking here, if it was equipment or what it was, I mean, that's just one example. I'm not picking on the fire department. I just happened to see that one had several in their department. So I just want to make sure that's not, I think it would be worth just checking that it's not specific to, expiring or retiring equipment that needs to be put back into play, that, it's not a movable price or negotiable, and we need a certain amount, something like that would be more
And
my question. Or
one of the things you need to keep in mind too is when we do the state budget doc, the state only cares about salary and wages and other expenses. So, if you look at any department, if our lines, take administration, we have $15,000 in contractual services. If I went over that next year for whatever reason, but I was under in any of the other O&E lines in administration, as long as we don't, if the total for that department is 109,902, we can't go over that amount. But it doesn't matter whether we're a little bit up in one versus the other in any individual department, because when Colleen prepares this budget in the state, she only gives them the salary and wage total and the O&E total. We break them down for our own planning purposes. But so it gives us a little leeway. So with any department, even where we made cuts, if they don't have enough for equipment, but they have more in miscellaneous, or they have more in another area, we can utilize that.
Okay.
We charge it appropriately, so we know next year,
Yes.
but we don't worry that, as long as we don't blow the whole line, we're good.
Right. You want me to go ahead?
If you have more questions, you're entitled to ask them. If you'd like me to move on. let me
No,
know.
I just have a couple more things I wanted to specifically ask about. If memory serves me, the borough has historically purchased a new police car every year.
Mhm.
I would offer for consideration that we come up with a plan where we do 2 years on, 3 years on, 1 year off, something of that nature. It's not a small lift, it's expensive, and that would provide us right there with that cap cushion we're looking for, just as an example. So I would offer that for a consideration. I know we had a different discussion about a different vehicle earlier in the year. So I offer that for a thought. And then my other question was, I'm looking at 209, code enforcement. I see a salary there. I know there's some moving pieces. Is that?
That's where we actually, we still pay Joe Muley out of that line.
Okay.
And I know he's not necessarily doing that part of the task right now, but it's hard to follow it year to year if you can't see what you spent in the department last year, so we left them there.
Okay. Right, but that's gonna provide some overage in that department, and maybe we're gonna reallocate some of those duties and responsibilities, or I know it's a different discussion for a different day, I just don't wanna have, you know, I wanna make sure that we're placeholding properly. And then 155, I'm looking at the account codes. That contractual, let's see. We put down to 130 for legal services, is that overall for the entire, all legal needs of the municipality, or?
We have some of the, in planning board, we have
Yeah.
their contractual, legal goes to that line.
Right.
So this would be all other, you know, whether it's tax appeals or whether it's personnel, anything with fair share housing. I took it down basically because I felt our actual last year as of 2/3/22 was 123,539. And I know last year, you know, we were dealing with fair share housing and I don't anticipate that we'll be doing it this year. So I'm comfortable taking it from what it was in the prior year, which is 175, and bringing it down to the 130.
Okay, do you have a recollection or ballpark of how much the fair share spent
I'd
was
have
last
to
year?
pull up that, you know, those specific bills, but,
I feel like the bulk of last year was the fair share, I'm wondering if
Yeah.
that,
you know, we pay our borough attorney out of that line, we pay tax appeals are high. We pay that out of there.
yeah, no, I'm wondering if it just feels a little high, but again, I guess I would say, you know, take the fair share off the top of last year, and that's probably about where we are, but that might help us with the cap as well.
I mean, we did 123,539. I know, you know, sometimes you never know in legal. You can get a lawsuit, someone just.
Totally understand.
I don't like to go much below actuals from the prior year, generally
Right.
speaking. I'm not saying you can't.
Right,
Once again, this is your budget. I'll do anything you want me to do, but I think if we were looking to shave something that, you know, if I've highlighted in yellow,
Yep.
I'm not really recommending we cut it any further, not that you
Yep.
can't, but I don't think I would pick that line if I were looking to take, you know, something off.
yeah, no, I just don't wanna, if we're, you know, looking at this cap cushion issue, if there's a way to alleviate that, and we're definitely done with, well, I shouldn't say done, we're never done with fair share, but if we're out of the woods, at least at this point, you know, maybe there's a refinement there. And then my last question, I'm interested to hear from everybody else, is the capital improvement fund, the annual 215, remind me the 35,000 was for,
Whenever we have to, when we do a bond authorization, just have 5% on hand in cash.
and that's where we build that
We
from,
build that from.
okay. And the other 200,000 is for future debt service.
Now, the other 200,000 is that ARP money, and we brought it into capital, and we offset it with the same revenue.
Correct.
So
Alright, okay.
you could, that'll be in your fund, and you could, let's just say you want to fund the Carter Pond directly. Tracy asked me that question today, that's why it's on my mind. You know, at 175,000, you could take that ARP money and instead of issuing debt for that, you could charge it directly to capital, if that was, you know, or anything else that you saw. But it is sitting there. Doesn't have to be spent this year if you don't want to spend it this year, but it's a way to bring the ARP money into the borough to allow you to use it in what most towns, when the federal government changed the rules, they originally said that we had to show that we lost revenue, but then they rethought that and they allowed you to bring it in this manner for the budget. And I think a lot of towns are doing it this way, probably, if you're just guessing.
Well, and they are, and the pitfall to that is something we're not doing, and that is because we're taking it. First of all, the capital improvement fund's outside of the appropriation cap, so that's not impacting our calculation. But we're putting it in there, and that way we're taking a revenue and we have an offsetting appropriation. So that way, when the revenue goes away, so does that appropriation, but it doesn't impact our operations. We're not doing a one-time revenue where then down the road, we're gonna have to find a way to fill that gap.
That's the budget neutral term that I heard you think, okay.
And think of it this way, let's just say you decided to take it off of police salaries, for example. And this year you reduced it by 200,000, and even next year. Well, when you get to year 3,
Yeah,
when you don't have that 200,000, now you've got a big hole. Doing it this way, you won't have that. because we just won't appropriate the extra $200,000 in capital when we don't have the offsetting ARP revenue to make it budget neutral.
Yep, and then just, I think I heard you correctly, that on the average assessed property in Fairhaven, based on this budget as drafted and presented today, the increase would be $10.88, or I'm sorry, 8 cents.
10 away a month.
Per month on the municipal portion.
Yes.
So it does not include the county, does not include the Board of Ed. It's just the municipal portion of taxes, so
The only one we control.
that's
But
right.
I did read in the
Yeah.
paper that the county is neutral this year. At least that's what they were saying. in the
Okay.
But that's on the average house, so close to.
That's on the average.
Right, so if you are above the assessed average, you'll see more.
see
If you're
more.
below the
Yes.
average assessment, you'll see less on the municipal portion at least.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we're just shy of $1 million now in the average assessment, which is, I think I think it was 455 when I first started here. If I had to go back and look, but that rings a bell somehow.
It also depends where you were assessed before.
Correct. If your assessment has changed, that will certainly impact, yeah.
Thank you. Councilwoman Net, anything, any questions?
Nothing major really. I guess I want to hear from the other council members if they have more questions. I would very much support the idea of potentially looking at the schedule of the purchase of new police cars. That's something that I specifically asked, I think at least twice about in the finance committee. I understand there's a reason why that it's on our schedule, but I think that maybe that's an area that we should consider cutting. So I would like to hear from the rest of the council, because there's something we should consider today.
The chief's not here to speak to it, but he does, every 5 years, he gives his vehicle replacement plan with his reasoning for why he's looking to replace a car. Every year, he gives the numbers and the mileage and all of that. So the 2022 car that he's looking to replace is a 2013 Ford. And he projected at the time when he did this, that it would have 140,000 miles on it. I'm not saying you're not capable of doing that. Next year, the chief will give you a new 5-year plan and updated what he's looking to replace. He's very, the police cars get a lot of use, and I certainly understand that would be an area where you might want to take a, look at. But then once again, next year, when you go to put that line item back in again, you won't go from 0 to 45. It's a lift, so you notice the lifts more than you notice, things that run steady.
Is it possible to, I know we talked about this for a different area of cars. Can we get a schedule of cars that we currently have in the years?
Yeah, fleet inventory.
I think Allison said
Thank
that.
you. That would be the formal name, fleet inventory. Thank you.
I think we are in search of the fleet inventory.
Yes.
Teresa,
My
can we,
guy.
We sent that out, well, we sent it.
Yeah, it's storage if I have it.
Okay. Yeah, I remember we talked about it for the non-PD vehicles at one point. I don't recall seeing
I
that
provided
one.
it to someone.
Someone,
There's
okay.
less, so-
Teresa, would that be a
Could I
situation,
request
sorry,
a
going back to the amount going to 0 and then back up next year? Is there a way to refund half of it this year, so then next year we only, is there a way to kind of phase that cost over a 2-year period?
The only thing I can think of is if you went to a longer lease than 3 years, we and I didn't really look into a lease that'd be longer because we make the payments.
Yeah,
A little
I mean more
smaller.
in terms of the budget itself, like is it possible to place it in the budget as a, something that next year we'll have the whole amount and then we could purchase a car?
There's no way you can like earmark funds from the 2022 budget
To next year.
to 2023. There's certain places and, you can do that, certain reserves that Colleen sets up, but purchasing a police vehicle would not be one of them. Now, you can purchase certain vehicles out of capital account. They have to be an SUV type of vehicle. Some towns prefer to do that way, but then you're borrowing money, generally speaking, to pay for your police cars. And that's, that, and then you're in the same thing. Next year, when you're done your capital budget again, it's whether it sits here or there.
The issue with purchasing police cars through capital is that to make it worthwhile to, just say put it with a bond ordinance or whatever, you usually have to bundle, you'd have to bundle a couple of cars at least, but then you're buying them all at the same time. And then they go all at the same time. And then you know, and you end up probably with the equivalent payment that you're currently doing with having, you know, one new lease come on each year. I actually, when I first came on as CFO, I went to the Monmouth County Improvement Authority because they do a specific program for purchasing police vehicles. But because our demand is so low, they wouldn't even take us on.
And that 45,000.
They said we're better off with our lease.
And that 45,000 isn't just the lease. We have to, we outfit our cars ourselves. And the chief's gotten much better. A few years back, we just put the lease amount in there. But then we were scrambling on how to get all the stuff that goes into making a real police car. So we do budget for the full amount now in that line.
What I recall on this, sorry, Mary, may I speak? Was the chief presented a plan, and the plan had largely to do with the fact that the fleet inventory was a little staggered, and they were running into issues with some of the vehicles that they couldn't replace them in a methodical and kind of intentional way. And so, correct me if you guys think something else, but I believe that the plan was put in place so that there could be controlled, intentional maintenance of the fleet. I would be perfectly willing to look at it, certainly if it would give us the ability to save a little money. I think we need, this is a tight budget. I can see some things that we could see a couple of things, but you did a good job with this. Went through it line by line, spent a lot of time with me as the new one, so thank you.
Thank you. I don't have many questions because I was participant to putting this together. The one thing that jumped out at me when I just looked at all of the numbers again, electricity didn't jump, though natural gas, fuel oil, and gasoline all jumped significantly. We all know why those things jump significantly, and we're budgeting for worst case scenario because we're living in a high fuel cost environment. With the electricity, and maybe this is for Colleen, you work on other budgets for other towns. Are they doing the same thing in electricity versus some of the more vehicle driven and backup fuels?
We're definitely budgeting more in the vehicle, the gasoline, the diesel, those kind of things. Not that we're not allowing room in the other areas, but those are the ones that are impacting us direct and hard right now. So we did, at least in my other budget, we went up higher definitely in the fuel oils. The other ones, we had cushion in there, and when we look at what our spend was for last year versus what we have in there, we feel that there's probably enough cushion in there. The other thing, that I recently said, and, I'll say it here too, is that some of this is, even though we can prepare for it, it's unpredictable.
Yep.
We don't know how high and how bad things are going to get. We don't know how quickly this could resolve, and, things could return to, a more normal, not to say to normal, but a more normal. So in those areas, what I say is we have to kind of make our best guesstimates, look at what we spent last year, see if there's room in there. If we feel we're comfortable with that, we go with it. And, not that I like doing them, but in the end, if we had to do an emergency appropriation because things were so, out of whack that we couldn't even prepare for it, then that's what we have to do. Again, it's not, we don't like going in saying, yeah, we're just going to leave it at that. We know it's not going to be enough. I don't like doing that, but there comes a point too where you also don't want to overfund and have that be a burden during a time when a lot of people are dealing with a lot of increased costs. So you're kind of trying, you're trying to balance that.
My other thought was, as fuel goes up every day, but in order to increase electricity or street lighting, they gotta go to BPU, and it's already March, and I haven't seen an application be filed. We do participate in the New Jersey SEM, and those bids go out next week, and we've done very well with that. So our actuals, Chris, you can see we spent 36,000 last year in electricity. We have 45 in there.
Yep.
Same thing, 37 is street light, we have 45 in there, so I think we're okay there. I'm not saying we're gonna have a whole lot left over, but I don't think we'll blow the line. And if we, like Colleen said, if we had to, we can always transfer in November and December when that time comes. And believe me, if gasoline goes to, I think $10 a gallon or something, or diesel, every town will be facing, every town will be doing emergency appropriation for, before November if they can't transfer. So, I think we're okay there. One that's in here, I don't want to say it's sticking out of store thumb, but I do need your further guidance on it. I do have $15,000 in here for fireworks for celebration of public events. If that's more of a governing body decision on whether or not we want to leave that in there or not leave it in there.
What have we done in the past, Teresa?
That we didn't budget it last year. That was for Fairhaven Day or the year before, but we added it in this year again in the possible thought that they might be able to pull that together between now and the summertime.
So that's the community celebration, is that what
Yeah,
that line
celebration
is?
of public events. That's,
I mean, everybody would love to see Fairhaven Day, I'm sure. I think the planning window is eliminated because that's a June event. I have spoken to some people who are on the ground planning and looking forward to, I think if we start planning now for 2023, we'd be in great shape, but that $50,000 seems to me,
15.
yeah, 15.
Yeah.
However, I will say, there is a community event being planned for May 14th, Love Where You Live event, another plug for them. And they certainly could use a little bit of money. Well, it's a first time event, they're not spending much, but a little bit of seed money might help, maybe $2,500. But personally, I don't see how we're gonna be able to spend $15,000 on fireworks for an event that isn't planned a month before there will be fireworks for the 4th of July.
We may not have fireworks. It's unlikely that Fairhaven Day will go on as it used to go on this year
Right.
in its full capacity. But that doesn't mean that we're not looking into other avenues to potentially give the residents of Fairhaven some sort of celebration that's been lacking, throughout COVID. So we're still looking at it.
Maybe something in the fall,
That's
No,
news to me.
No, we're still
June,
contemplating a summer something.
summer.
Yes. So, won't be Fairhaven Day though.
I have no idea what that would be. Are you planning something, Mayor?
I am not.
Because I talked to the people who are planning,
Right.
And that might be news to them as well.
It is not. It is not. So I'd say maybe that's not something to make a decision on just yet. I believe if the money's not used, Teresa,
No, lots of surplus in 2 years,
Yeah.
as those things go.
I think everybody could use a celebration. If there was a way to do something to bring the community together this year, I really think it would be incredibly welcome. I would support.
Well, May 14th, mark your calendars. I just want to support them. It's going to be their first time event. It's something they hope to build on every year.
before we go on to Councilwoman Koch, I just want to make sure everyone knows that this is Colleen Lapp. She's our Chief Financial Officer.
Sorry.
So if you hear her speaking, that's who is speaking. Councilwoman Koch.
I do have a question, and Teresa did spend a lot of time with us this afternoon. We went through this pretty much line by line, but I have a question under engineering, under 165. Our contractual services went from 15 to 35, and the notation is potential for increased services. Now, is that related to the consent agenda tonight where we're talking about CME and environmental?
No, that would be charged to your facilities plan.
Okay.
We hired a new, we appointed CME this year. How much, and I know we have a tree expert, coming on board. I don't know how much we intend to use them. We did go out for survey quotes and we ended up staying with Valley and didn't use CME, but CME's survey quote was, I think, like $8,000 or $10,000 higher than the one we got. So I put that in there. I'm not saying we couldn't cut it a little more. I just was trying to, get an idea for what the governing body may want them. Like there are some projects sitting out there that, like living shoreline to Normandy, I thought there was some potential that some of the projects that were sitting out there, the governing body may want to consider using some, their consulting engineering firm
I
for.
think we
So
could cut that back a little bit.
I flagged it as well. I think it might even be a little redundant, and at the moment. we have-
Yeah, just so I'm understanding, Teresa, do you mean in terms of striking on the balance of the duties that we give to Rich in-house as our borough engineer versus duties or like engineering projects we might outsource, or that ones that we absolutely must outsource?
No, I just thought there was a possibility that, we may be, spending a little more in consulting engineer that we paid in the past, and I put in there based on that. I don't, like I said, that was just me, and I gave you a perfect reason why I thought. I said, potential for increased services. And a couple of things that I had just mentioned, came to mind,
Yeah.
like we wanted to, do, something, not necessarily a road job, but something that was, if Rich is busy with 5 road jobs and you wanted some small engineering thing done, you would have that option of using your consulting engineer. Once you have the consulting engineer, you don't have to go out for quotes or, they're appointed.
Right.
So if the governing body said, hey, take a look at this, see what, we'd like to get this done, I put money in there with that thought in mind.
I have to agree with Betsy. I flagged this as well because I wasn't clear, and I know that CME does engineering as well as tree expert does services, but of course that would come, those services be associated with projects under escrow for private properties. So this feels maybe a little preemptive, thoughtful of you, but perhaps that would come out of discussion around priorities for
I can
projects.
certainly trim that down a little bit.
Thank you.
Mayor, could I ask a couple of questions?
That was my big question.
Councilwoman Cole?
Thank you. So we've eliminated this, which helps me because I wanted to make sure the Shade Tree Commission, which also includes consulting services. I would like to say, while those are not, we anticipate with an updated tree ordinance that the fees that we collect will offset the cost of the consulting services that we now pay in our budget. So that's one thing that should improve.
But we'd have to have a year of that revenue coming in. When you go to your revenue page, Colleen, anticipates revenues, but we still need someplace to charge it in this year's budget. Whether it's Bill Brooks, you won't, even when those fees go up, I can't collect a higher fee and the revenue that comes in and charge a bill right against it in the same budget. You'll see that increase pay off next year when you have increased revenue. Because
Okay,
Colleen cannot budget more in revenue than she collected in the prior year.
so then it will be important. I tracked it over the last few years and there is a gap. I wouldn't say it's a huge gap, but we could continue to track it just as the new ordinance is being written. We want to make sure that our fees cover those the fees we take in, the revenue covers the expenses. Right. Let's see. Oh, on the American Revenue or the American Rescue Plan, they said the total was 600,000 over 2 years, not 3. Is that right?
Right, we get it in 2 tranches. We got one last year. We'll get one again this year. You have until the end of 2024 to commit the funds, obligate the funds, and then you have an additional year or 2, I forget what it is, to spend the funds. So what we talked about was, so we have until 2024 to tell the federal government what we're doing with the funds. So we figured if we did 200, 200, 200 approximately over the next 3 years, that gets us to the end of 2024 and we've obligated all the funds and we're putting it into the borough through the budget in a smooth fashion, trying to, I mean, if we had something we really, we had a great project and we wanted to get it all done and we want to use all of it in 1 year, you could, but since we didn't have anything like that, we said that doing it smoothly over the next 3 years is probably the best way to go.
What did we use it for last year?
We didn't. Last year we received the funds, but it was a little crazy last year between the federal government not coming out with their final rules until the fall and then waiting for the state to promulgate to us as municipal governments how we can use the funds, you know, the mechanisms for it. So we didn't end up using it for anything really last year. I mean, we put a nominal amount in for a financial advisor in case we needed that for planning, but even with that, I don't think we're even gonna end up using that.
So where would that show up in here? The two,
The 200,000 will be, it'll be on the revenue side. As a matter of fact, the state just put out something last week, so on the revenue side of the budget, there's sheet 10, which is special items of revenue, and that has to be approved by the state. So in your budget document, once that's prepared and ready for introduction, you'll see that on sheet 10. And then you'll see the increase in the capital improvement fund. But also just for reporting purposes and for what's allowable. It's just got one more step in it. We're actually going to identify some of the police salary and wages that equates to the 200,000 because that's an allowable expense. And so the ARP funds are really being used to kind of offset that. But then we put it in another place in the budget so that that amount, the capital improvement fund amount, can be removed when the ARP funds are no longer available.
I may have another question about that. I'm not sure I was able to follow it all. But did the 200,000 from the ARP last year, did that just end up in surplus?
No,
Okay,
no,
so,
they can't end up in surplus. It's not
Okay.
allowed.
okay, that's kind of where I was just.
There's a lot of accounting involved and I don't mind going through it, but right now it's in grant fund as an unappropriated reserve.
Oh, that's what that is. That was one of the things I was trying to ask you about. I didn't understand what that was. Now I know.
What an unappropriated reserve means that the money's sitting there, but you can't spend it. We don't have the authority to spend it. So
And how do we acquire that authority? That's just.
that there's 3 ways you can spend a municipal government: through your budget, through a trust fund, and grants are considered part of your budget, and through capital. So those are our 3
Okay.
ways to spend. And last year, the state had everyone put it into an unappropriated reserve. And the only way you could spend it is if you did a chapter 159, which you guys do sometimes for other grants. That allows us to spend. And we did do that for the financial advisor portion of it. But other than that, you bring it in through this way, through the budget. You bring it in, it flows in and out of the grant fund.
So do we want to bring the balance of that unappropriated reserve into capital for 2022?
No. The plan is, as we have it, is to bring in 200,000 through the budget, use it as an offset. And
I
then,
meant last year's.
well, last year we received a little over 300,000. We received 50% last year, 50% this year. The actual receipt of the cash doesn't mean we can spend it.
Okay.
It has to, that's why it goes into an unappropriated reserve in the grant fund, because that means we're not allowed to spend it. And the only way that we could have spent it last year was through chapter 159. To use it as a 159, the state had put out guidance on how we could spend it, and we just didn't have the desire to spend it in the ways that they had laid out for us. So since the federal government has finalized their rules, since the state has just put out the local finance notice, we have a little more idea of how it could be spent according to both of those authorities.
Limits of time.
I know, it's complicated.
It
It's
did
overly
take them a while
complicated.
to promulgate the rules and to figure out, how they wanted it done. And honestly, the governing body even approved it. We initially thought we would need our financial advisor to help us because it was very complicated. But I think everyone, Greg can speak for his town, I think everyone was somewhat, I don't want to say complaining to their legislatures, but the federal government got the word that it was just too much of a burden on the locals, so that's, they simplified the rules, recently, just in the last few months.
Lean to it, Randy, you guys are.
Yeah, like the final ruling came out in November. I think,
Right.
if I recall.
Right.
So it was almost, it was basically too late. at that point.
And then it took the state, a while to kind of comb through that and decide how to make it fit with our accounting practices as municipal governments.
Before I conclude, I thank you very much for being here tonight and answering the questions.
Anytime.
So it strikes me that, we clearly, our home values have gone up. And this is more of a comment, I just want to say, because strategically, when I look at sort of where we're going as a community, what I see is our private investments have outpaced our public investments, especially in the shared amenities we enjoy, whether it's rec and fields and trails and bird sanctuaries, ponds, creeks, wetland areas, all kind of crying out for attention right now. And I know this is probably going to be part of a separate conversation that we have on capital. And I would say, I don't know what the plan is, but I would like to consider, I would like you to consider holding a special meeting so we can talk about that at length and set some meaningful priorities. But I want to say, within light of this, though, I believe it's time for us to really take care of what we have. New projects are exciting, but I also think there are there's a call for taking care of and maintaining what we have in order to maintain our quality of life. It's not as exciting, but everybody loves the trail system. It takes an investment. It takes time and attention. We have to take care of the river. We have to take care of the ponds. We have to take care of the creeks. I went around town and took photographs. We have much work to do just to be able to take care of what we have. We have a lot and it's good, but if we don't take care of it, those amenities will become crises of our own making, much like what I would say the best example of that is part of McCarter Pond. So I look forward for our next conversations when we can talk meaningfully about the priorities and how to preserve and maintain the quality of life.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Who else?
No, I'll just echo
Oh.
Tracy. Yeah, as I say.
Councilman McHugh. Councilman McHugh, any questions?
No, thank you, Mayor.
I was just gonna echo Tracy. I had recently made a similar request, as you know, Mayor, to have either a special meeting or a discussion in advance of the upcoming or anticipated bond ordinance, so we can discuss any and all potential capital things. You have to know all the cards on the table before you can decide which ones you're gonna pick, put in your hand. And so before we make those decisions, I think it would be a good and worthy use of our time to have those discussions and anticipation.
I don't think anyone up here disagrees with either of those. I think it's just the timing of it.
Sure.
So
Saturday morning's not good for you.
I'm thinking, we have some very big potential facilities that we're considering right now.
Decisions.
And those are the biggest cards in that pile.
Yes, yes.
So
We
I
need to
think,
know
I think we have a little bit
those
more clarification and then we'll set the meeting that was just discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Colleen. Thank you, Teresa.
Before we thank, we're looking to introduce this budget at the next meeting. So off of tonight's meeting, other than lowering engineering consulting to some degree, I don't know if the governing body wants to give me a target or you want to go ahead and limit the police car. But I'm going to need some guidance because it's a lot of work for Colleen and the auditor to get this into a state budget doc and get it all ready to introduce at the next meeting. So any changes that we want to make to this current budget, you'd have to give me some, either a target you want me to hit through cuts or, we didn't talk about revenue, but I don't think there's anybody that's looking to use more surplus than we currently are using, which is the same amount as last year for reasons we talked about the last time. So I need marching orders when it comes to what you want me to do with the actual, I'm assuming inside the cap appropriations and whether or not you want to try to take them down and if you want to try to give me a number, if that's what you want to do. I certainly can update this budget and then send it back out to you
Do we wanna, take a vote on the car, on the police car?
I would be curious to see, what the chief's response to that would be. What?
Not curious, I know exactly
Well,
what's
I
going
know
on.
that, but what's
What do you
the
mean?
downside
How did I leave the meeting?
of doing it every 2 years? I mean, I understand it's bringing in another $45,000 every other year into the budget. But what's the true downsides to maintenance and to maintaining his fleet?
He's not here, but my take on this would be, since he does his vehicle replacement plan every 5 years, and of course, they did adopt it back in 18 when he put forward, and then not that doesn't bind the future governing body, but you are on you're in the final year here, I think that might be, something that you might want to say to the chief, when he goes to bring his next 5-year plan out, next year, or tell him to start working on it now. That's really up to you, but if you really feel strongly that you want to, hit a target and you want to eliminate the car as part of that, I certainly can, ask the chief to opine on that and give you a reason why he's.
Councilman Potts, we have, the finance committee has asked that question.
Oh, yeah. And what was his response?
I think similar to what Teresa is explaining, it does create some increased maintenance costs because the cars are heavily used. But my understanding is that in the past, we have done something else than every year. It seems like we adopted this procedure, and Teresa, maybe you know that, of purchasing a car every year more recently. So it's been done differently before. I think it's kind of a, you can balance the need for increased maintenance with whether we want to purchase one every year.
After this
In
5-year
his
cycle,
average mileage on the car
The
is-
chief says, with my time and experience, I believe that a good rule of thumb is about 5 years or 100,000 miles in a car. Once they reach this time, the maintenance, repair cost, condition of the interior, and overall performance usually makes it unusual patrol. When I first started 30 years ago, we purchased 2 cars per year. Over the past 15 years or so, that has changed. Some years we bought 2, some 1, a few years we bought none.
were your ears burning?
Oh, jeez.
I didn't do it.
This is like the
I know
people's
we're catching
court.
you kind of off
You
guard
understand?
here, but the governing body really wants your sage input on the purchasing or leasing of a police car every single year. I was reading from your prior memo, but they're considering couldn't go a year without a car is what they're asking in this year's budget.
That's what you're asking now.
It's about-
Put you on the spot.
The problem is that, years past, we have not gotten a car in years. We used to get 2 cars a year up until, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And then for a couple years, we didn't get no cars. What happens is it starts to build up. So what happens, as soon as you go without a car for 1 year, it's just a ripple effect that you might not see this year, but next year, then, right now, we have car control of over, I'm just off the top of my head, because I don't have it in front of me, like 140,000 miles. How old is this one?
Yeah.
But, we have a car with 140,000 miles that will come out of patrol. The next car that will come out of patrol has like 120. A patrol car, 80, 100,000 miles is about the life of a patrol car. So, you absolutely, what happens is, if you say at this moment, because you go, yeah, but it's a ripple effect, because then next year you'll be short, and then it keeps going, builds up. That's what happened. Like, so we used to get 2 cars a year, and then a couple years we got no cars, and we're kind of still feeling that effect now, believe it or not, because you still have that where we're still trying to catch up. And with 1 car a year, it just keeps our head above water, it keeps us right there. Once you go less than that, we start having problems.
What's the average mileage per year on a car about?
Again, this, I don't know how old that picture is here.
That's your 5 years.
Yeah, this is from 22. So you just look, this car says 13, has 140,000 miles, so what's that, 9 years? Some have more or less, depends on what they use for. Cars are assigned to different people, so more guys has more miles than that. Like, we have a Tahoe that has like 90,000 miles, that's a supervised car, doesn't have any miles on it, so it's hard to tell. Around, I would say 20,000 a year. It's about 5 years, about 100,000 miles.
Well, we discussed a number of things in terms of where areas we could cut. So perhaps Teresa, the finance committee can take a look at that and give us some sort of recommendation based on the handful of things and anything else they identify that might be appropriate.
Yeah,
To
it looked
adjust.
like-
I don't want to jump to a decision right now. We're all kind of just digesting all this information. But I realize Teresa and Colleen need some direction.
So what I captured was engineering. There was a delta between $25,000 last year and $35,000 this year. So it was a $10,000 jump. And we spent $26,000 last year on engineering. So it wasn't, we're not gonna get rid of $35,000. We might get rid of 10, but we might only get rid of 5, depending on.
I'm looking at the $20,500 increase in contractual services, which I think can be eliminated.
That's the one under engineering.
I was looking at a
I'm sorry, that's
$35,000 number,
Yes.
and we spent 26 last year.
What line number are you on?
We spent 6,600 last year.
You might be in two different
Oh, yeah, I
places.
think we might be. in two different places.
This is engineering consulting,
165?
165 to 11.
Are you looking at engineering?
Last year we had adopted 15,000, we spent 6,600.
I
So
think
I
we're
mean-
safe at 15,000, to be truthful. in my
I
opinion.
was looking at another area, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what were you looking at?
I'll tell you. Sorry. There's many pages.
If, you know, if I take that down, you know, you're talking, you know, probably, let me say I take it down 20,000 more. Did you have a target where you want to try to get to 30 inside the cap or something?
Teresa, can you just explain the contractual services one more time? Just so I can, Wrap my
It
head
would
around
be anything, and it's not, let me pull up what we spent last year, just to give you an idea of what Rich uses that for.
in other words, if we, I'm just throwing this out there, if it was another year and we were looking to acquire a pocket park, would that fall underneath these contractual services that you're talking about?
No, not unless you wanted, for whatever reason, the engineer to, you know, to do some sort of a study or something along those lines. Like the year it's older, but the year when we did the first Macara Pond study, we charged the engineer contractual. I'm just looking to give you an idea what he actually charged there last year.
It's 6,600, or what it was, yeah, I don't know.
Charge a decent amount of surveying to that is not related to a road project or a capital project. We did legal descriptions multiple times to Valley. They did a subdivision plan for us. So a lot of that last year went to Valley surveying for different unrelated to road projects, surveying needs. I'm sure it had to do with when we were doing some of the Rossi and some of the subdivisions that we did over there. And so that's what he spent, that's what engineering contractual was last year, when he used something for engineering that, you know, we use a professional for. But I mean, I'm happy to take that down.
I mean, we spent 6,600 on it last year, and we budgeted 15,000.
Mhm.
So I think I'm proposing, we eliminate the proposed increase of 136.67%, which amounts to $20,500, which would still leave $15,000 in there, which was, well, we only spent 6,000. I mean, we talk about it much longer, I might argue we should drop it even more.
You good? Everyone good with that? Good?
Anything else from, you know,
Well, the other two items were the police car and the fireworks.
right,
And I don't know that we have much appetite to slash those right now, but we could have conversations about whether we,
Well,
you know, if
I,
we did $10,000 worth of fireworks instead of 15.
well, it's, what is it called again? Community. public-
celebration of public events.
I would prefer we call it that and let, if it has to stay in, and I personally would be comfortable eliminating because it's been called fireworks, but if we're not gonna put it towards an event that's in the works already, then I don't really see the point of keeping it in the budget. The only event that I know that's in the works right now is the one 514 Bicentennial Hall, love where you live. So I don't even see the purpose of, unless you want to leave it as an
Well,
open.
this is for the next 12 months too, so,
That's what I
you know,
hear.
we could do something in May of next year that.
No, it's calendar year.
December.
Okay, so we
January
have to
20.
do something
December
this
till
year.
December 30th.
We can do something for summer or fall.
I would think if it's
I just think that, just think the community has asked for something. There's a lot of feedback out there that says, a lot of these things were lost because of COVID. They're learning for something. Maybe we should put a group together now to plan for it, and see who that should be.
We could always turn it to a rec committee as well. They're very good at planning
sure.
events. We have some things that
That'd be
are in the works and calendar. They tend to err on the smaller side, the ag hunt, things like that. But certainly there are things we could use that money to source. for
So let's not
any
earmark it
number
for
of
fireworks.
events. I think we could reduce it. I think I agree with you with that.
The issue with running Fair in May this year was the ability to fundraise for it. Setting up a 501(c) and actually doing it.
It's a lot of work.
Fireworks, not that there's not other costs involved in setting off fireworks for the borough, but we don't have to get a stage, we don't have to get a band, we don't have to do all those things. So there is the opportunity potentially, not necessarily even in June, for some sort of micro event in which we set off fireworks. I don't know what that is yet. I can't announce that we have something ready to go, but I'm agreeing with Councilwoman Neff that I think the residents of this borough deserve it. They need it. They need it. It's been a long 2 years, and we should be able to celebrate as a community this summer in some capacity. Now, whether that goes under fireworks or it goes under celebration with the idea that we hope that we can use it for fireworks at some point, I think it's a good idea. I do.
Could we send it to rec?
I'm sorry.
Councilwoman Plotch, are you okay with her idea to send this to rec and see if rec can come up
We
with
can
something?
certainly get feedback from them.
Well, Mayor, I'd be interested to hear, I see a lot of wheels turning, and we haven't really had a full conversation on it, but I defer to you to at least have that conversation and see where things currently stand, and we can kind of work the pieces of the puzzle. If rec can help and be supportive, I'm sure that that's a possibility. I don't want to put more on our rec director than necessary either, but let's have the conversation, let's see what makes sense. But for budget purposes, Tracy, it sounds like you're proposing eliminating it.
Well, I'm proposing if there's this consensus is you want to keep something in there for some sort of festivity, don't narrow it to fireworks, just in case the volunteers who get together to plan this thing say, oh, we'd actually really like to X, Y, Z, really.
Sure.
I don't think it is because it's community celebration, so.
Yeah,
Well, it does sound like people are talking about fireworks, that's all I'm saying.
Right.
That was the original
And that
intent.
we added that
That's their
line
tax
back,
dollars, so.
we added that line back when we did the centennial. And it's always been $15,000 and it's always been used for the fireworks. I'm not saying you couldn't use it for something else, but that's hence why it's 15, hence why we're talking fireworks, because that's how it's, we eliminated the last two budgets because of COVID.
Yeah. I would just leave it at if it was 15 2 years ago with inflation, I don't know if we want to cut it any further. We'll give ourselves the room to plan for something. If we don't use it, then we don't. But I would suggest leave it there. Could you reuse something?
Are we gonna have a rec committee between now and the next council meeting? I mean,
The
sequentially.
next.
no,
I don't think we are, because I'm just
No,
looking at
because
the
it's
calendar.
in
here.
it's the 28th,
that's right.
yeah,
And they meet the first, oh, they're meeting April 12th. They moved their meeting.
Yeah,
They moved their
because-
meeting a week.
I
Yeah,
forget why we moved it.
You know, they met on the 1st of this
You
month.
can introduce the budget with that 15,000 still there. If you decide to cut it before you adopt it, you can certainly do so.
Let this get transit.
That's good. Let's move on with that.
Okay,
All right.
so I'm gonna go ahead and cut the engineering contract, consulting line and leave it as is for introduction once I make that fact.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay,
We don't need Colleen for anything else if we're
I
moving
don't
on.
believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know what, before, let's wait, hang in there till someone says, let's open for public.
No, that's
comments.
fine.
Stay through that, Kyle, because someone might ask me a question that I can't answer when we're in the budget. No, I'll look. So if we finish the rest of the workshop and go just through public comment on agenda items.
Sure.
If someone has a question, Colleen.
Moving along, street opening request from New Jersey Natural Gas for a main installation at 15 Laurel Drive. Do they have any questions? No? Do they have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have a request from Girls on the Run to hold their annual 5K run on June 5th. Do you have any questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we have townwide yard sale, May 7th. Anyone have any questions?
Are you keeping the $7 fee? It's
Yeah.
usually $5, upping it to $7.
To participate in the townwide yard
It's
sale?
going up?
No,
$2?
it's always been,
It's always been
$2
$2.
more for the town.
I'm okay with that.
I have one question though. Normally, we have bulk pickup in the zones on the western side of town. Would that be May 2nd? The only reason I'm asking is maybe we could push bulk pickup back a week.
Good,
So
yeah.
when people try to sell their stuff, they don't have to drag it back in their house. They
Well, it
can,
will work for spring and fall.
Well, something, it's good.
what do you think?
They can't pick up bulk for the whole town.
Right,
No.
but at least, you know,
Those two zones.
Yeah.
those two zones will have the opportunity to be picked up. The first zones would be picked up the Monday before the
They would
yard
be picked
sale.
up May 2nd.
May 2nd.
1 and 2.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say, very ineloquently.
But
So you're looking to make 1 and 2 on the 9th and 3 and 4 on the 16th?
Yeah.
we certainly could do that. The only consideration there is sometimes 3 and 4 might put them to the curb and you might have it out longer than you would want. But I certainly don't have an issue with, asking, I'd have to ask Suburban.
Could we do the garage sale April 30th?
There's
Saturday,
something else that.
Yeah, I think so.
What is it? April 30th and the 1st. Is it the area of natural area cleanup? Not that these things can't happen at the same time, I just know that the date has something else.
29th is Arbor Day, is there anything?
Oh,
planned for
that-
I don't have anything on the calendar for 30th right now.
No,
I don't think our date was finalized for natural area cleanup.
maybe it was loose.
so maybe it'd be simpler to move the garage sale back a week and moving bulk forward a week.
Have we given out many
How
permits
about-
already?
You know what, May
Let-
7th is also the fishing derby,
It always
They're-
falls every year.
They're always on the same day.
are they?
Yeah,
So you can
Let's keep
fish
it-
or shop.
you can
not
choose. You can do either or.
You
Good
can
job.
Well, the
fish as
fishing
heavy
I think that's an ordinance.
both.
No fishing or shopping on the same
What's
day.
that?
I mean, what do we usually do in the townwide yard sale? 45 permits, give or take?
It's pretty popular and people are chomping at the bit.
We have 2,200 homes, so it's not as if,
Right.
Even if you have 50 or 60 participate in the town yard sale. I can ask Suburban if we can move pickup, but, it's on the calendar. Some people are gonna put things out anyway, no matter how hard we
Well, that's what
try.
I'm saying, would it be easier to move it
A
back a
week
week?
ahead.
Yeah, I have no problem with April 30th if you want to change the date to April 30th. Unless anybody
That
else
might
has
be easier.
a red flag. Al?
No, I don't have 12 minutes in my office, that's fine.
The only red flag would be it's earlier,
No, for-
less chance of good weather.
Wait, you wanna move the date of the yard sale?
Back
You got
a
it?
week.
I got it.
I mean, because it's not fair to the people who live on one side of town, if they don't sell their stuff, they're just gonna put it out. You don't have to wait a month to put it out on the
How
curb.
old, how long, how many years has this event been? The townwide yard sale,
Townwide?
Yeah.
I'm here 15 years.
and has the fishing derby always been the same day?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can't touch this. Is it, that's like, people anchor their plans and thinking around it, even though it's a brilliant idea, but I think, that's my 2 cents. I also don't know that it's the best use of our time at this point.
No.
Maybe, no.
It's a big gap.
That's what I think. we should do. People get used to their.
I'm just gonna throw out, this event seems a lot different than it used to be to me anyway, since Facebook popped up and now there's all the
Yes.
different trade and sell sites and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So people fundamentally rid themselves of the stuff that is unwanted during the year. And there's not, I imagine there's probably not as many permits as you used to have. I could be wrong, but
Oh, we haven't had it.
there used to be more enthusiasm around the event. That's what I recall.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I don't know. I like the idea of May a little better. I think people tend to go clean out as beach clubs are opening, beaches opening, you find beach chairs, that sort of thing. I don't know.
So what are we doing here?
That's
Are we
up to
going
you
on?
guys, it was just a suggestion.
Can I make a motion to keep it on the 7th?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I-
Anyone opposed?
Thank you.
An amendment to the floodplain management ordinance.
This came from the DEP. In ordinances that we had to upgrade, they had a model ordinance that they had sent out. Allison and Greg and Nick Krasinski have worked very hard on this. We had to send an updated draft to the DEP for their review. Ultimately, the bottom line is, these are in here tonight to give you an idea of what the changes are. And we will have to introduce these and have them adopted by June 18th. 15th. So, you know, these will be, once we get the blessing from the DEP and the borough attorney solid with Nick, what is, you know, what changes are gonna be upgraded, we'll probably put them, I would imagine, back on workshop maybe in April, and then look to introduce them and adopt them before the June 15th date. But we wanted to get them to you so you could start looking.
Is there a meaningfully anything?
So, yes, so you received two documents. You did not receive the track change version that Nick sent to DEP because honestly, by the time I pulled the markup back up, and I'm the one who's doing it, I don't know what they're gonna do with it, but that's what they want. What I gave you guys instead was the original model ordinance that's highlighted right in there for the things that are movable or are a matter of discretion and are not part of the standards that you can see are clearly there. And then the largest part of Allison, mine, the code helper for general code, our vendor, and Nick was really coordinating it with your code so that it all cross-references correctly, sits correctly, that sort of thing. So things to note of the things that you can change, the higher you require the elevation, the more expensive it is for your residents. So most municipalities have just kept the general standard of the DEP. They haven't made it more stringent because raising houses is expensive and you never know when someone has a situation, but it could be more difficult in that regard. There's also monetary fines in there. You guys have the authority up to $2,000 under the statute if you want to do that. Honestly, theoretically, if it's violating this has a much bigger problem than $2,000. So I'm not sure what the terrific efficacy is of that. And then the last thing is a look back period because you trigger this by certain improvements to property over a certain time period. And Nick had come up with that. Obviously, he's our floodplain administrator. Based upon things that, based upon your community. So if you have any questions in that regard about that look back period, get on a call with you or what have you. With that summary, you can tell there's not a lot that you guys get to change on the actual floodplain regulations. So they mostly leave that to the administrative experts of the DEP. So you can see a lot of that is very fixed. The maps are fixed because the water goes where it goes. There's not really much you can do about that either. And so those are the mechanisms. So I just wanted to, that extra document you have is the copy of stuff you can't change in class.
And the look back period is, I think, about 10 years.
Nick chose, yes, 10 years. It's also what Bradley Beach did as well.
Okay.
And the standard essentially is if you have an improvement that improves the value of the property more than 50% during that 10-year period, based upon the permits and things and plans you have on file, then you would then trigger, let's say you had a 30% improvement in your property, and then you went and did another 30, well, then that would trigger these regulations upon you. So they don't apply to everyone in town, only those making substantial improvements to these properties. And then again, where the higher you raise the limits, the more expensive it becomes for your residents, obviously. But those are in certain flood areas, obviously.
So I was looking at this and it is an immense amount of work. the question, and I have many questions, but not for tonight. The one question I have for tonight has to do with procedure and review. And is this going to, what changes in procedure do you think these new regs will, how will it impact our application and permit and review process? Is it just gonna be embedded in everything?
So this, it's really up to you mean in terms of like what the average person sees if they go
Yes.
there?
If they go to, fill out a zoning permit.
I mean, most of the
application,
people that are gonna be dealing with this are gonna be professionally, it's not gonna be a resident coming in to put something in. I mean, you're talking about substantial improvements to the property, 50%. Unless you do a real little bit at a time, which is not, most people don't do just for simply economic reasons and financing. It's gonna be a builder, a construction company. It's gonna be someone who's gonna be dealing with this at that level.
Okay,
There'll be certainly be engineering involved if you're doing a project of this size.
okay.
So it won't be unrepresented residents going and trying to figure out how high their house is. It'll be a substantial project and not professionals.
Thank you.
Sure.
We don't need a motion there, correct? Okay.
Nick's gonna send that tomorrow.
Moving on, public comment on agenda items. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. This is for agenda items only, please. Yes.
Hi, I would like to address the 32 Brisk Street tree removal. Should I wait until we get to it, or should I do it now?
It's under old business.
On the agenda.
It's on the
You can
agenda.
speak- you can speak to it. Sure.
I go out to go up. Sleep so long. Legs went to sleep. Rick Grace, 523 River Road. And I probably know more about this property than anybody in this room because I was very familiar with the owner for many years. And consistently tried to tell her, please cut your trees back. And I would go over, I would do yard work. We were friends. When my kids came, we'd sometimes go over and see what we could do. I'm also the listing broker on the sale of the house. And when she first listed the house, we did a Google search, and I have here, I think, enough copies just for the council. In the picture, there's a balloon, that's the property. If you will look at the top of the balloon in the lot, there's a brown patch. That is her backyard. The bushes on the left side of the driveway of the property are roses Sharon, they're bushes, they're not trees. Most of what was in the backyard was shrubs, because I trimmed a lot of it. And you have basically nothing but grass in the back. The only trees were these two giant humongous pine trees that she let grow. And they not only grew over the sidewalk in the front, they grew over the street sidewalk in the front. And I'm sure Chief McGovern can testify to that. And the bottom branches had grown for so many years, they were like 12 to 15 foot long on a branch, and the bottom was laid on the ground. I think that you are mistaken in giving Mr. Capital Builders a hard time on this, because those two trees are the bulk of what we're fighting about. They needed to come down. Nobody could go in down her front walk. The branches just laid across the front wall, but she was happy with it that way. That's the way she wanted it. Somebody said to me when the trees were taken down, I didn't know there was a house back there. So I just think this whole thing is a tempest in a teapot on these trees. Thank you.
Ruth, thank you for your time and your comments.
Nice to see you at a council meeting.
Anyone else?
If
Anyone on
you're
the owl?
participating, I have one hand raised. Stephanie Adams, if you unmute yourself, you can speak. You have your hand raised? It's been up a long time. Miss Adams? Maybe,
She might be on the iPad. Sometimes it raises your hand for you.
oh, it went down, so we're good.
Okay.
Anyone else from the public? If you raise your hand, did you have a question? No, sir.
Okay. Moving along.
I'm gonna let Colleen go now, and
Yes, thank you,
Good night,
Colleen.
Colleen.
Yeah.
Everyone have a great night.
Thanks, Colin.
You're welcome. Any questions, just let Teresa know. I'll weigh in where needed.
Okay, we're moving on to the approval of minutes for the February 28th, 2022 regular meeting and executive session. May I have a motion to approve the February 28th regular and executive session meeting minutes?
Motion.
Second,
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members, Chris McKee,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Koch,
yes.
McHugh. Cecil.
Mike, you're on mute.
He abstains.
Matt,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to old business, tree removal appeals. We'll start with Capital Home Builders, 32 Fifth Street.
Last session, I know that we had some thoughts, and it was decided that we go to post some escrow for an additional arborist tree expert to review the application, review the property, as well as review a proposed landscape plan that was provided for both lot 1502 and lot 1503. I spoke with Ms. Spiro, I believe is her name. We had some discussions. She asked me some additional info, which I provided to her. I believe a day or two later, she did provide a report to the board. I saw it as well. She seemed to support a lot of what we had previously thought we would hold for Mr. Brooks. There were some, I guess, comments she had regarding a couple of the species of trees that we were presenting to plant, which he very quickly said we have no problem, adjusting the number of plantings that she wanted as well as the species. We quickly turned over a new plan that showed the adoption of the new species that she asked for, along with the removal of some of the, I guess, before both the rear screening of the trees because she felt they were planted too close together. We provided that both to the board via email as well as I think I dropped 6 hard copies of each lot. They were pretty much mirroring each other, but we wanted to give you both of them. I dropped them over to Allison, and we are here now, I guess, to get a decision on whether you are okay with the plan, the decision by the arborist, and hopefully, it's my understanding that is my last item in my, I guess, resolution compliance, so I can then move forward with building. Fortunately, we do have one of the houses already sold, and the people are local and in town is very, very eager to get moving forward, as am I, obviously. It's been a, long process, but I'm happy to comply with what the board wanted, and I hope that this is something that works for you.
Any questions?
No.
None.
I think Capital Home Builders has been extremely cooperative.
Thank you for your responsiveness.
Thank you.
For the public and Mrs. Jans, we have a very strict prohibition on clear cutting. And that was the nature of the reason for the appeal. Mr. I'm sorry, what is your name?
Geyer.
Mr. Geyer is in compliance with the plan proposed by an arborist. And I do like the plan, and I think it'll help enhance your sites, and I think it'll be an improvement overall. Responsiveness.
May I have a motion?
I move that we approve his request for an appeal
Second.
for 30 days.
And landscape plan.
Excuse me, and the landscape plan accordingly.
Also, does that necessitate a roll call?
I think we
Varies
should,
by law, or if we can do it individually.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Members, Commissioner Keith,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
McHugh. Matt,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
thank you. So for Mayor and Council, for your benefit, I'll draft an appropriate resolution with the materials attached that were produced by the applicant. And we'll send that over to the planning board so that you can get your condition of approval taken care of. Okay?
Can you include a copy of the landscape plan too?
I'm just gonna make them exhibits to the resolution, right? I'm not gonna,
They were copied on.
They were.
Sandy was given copies of each before reference.
yeah, they're okay with the comment.
I just want to say out loud on the record, I'm very appreciative of what you did after the fact, but I do want it to be known, much like Councilwoman Cole said, you know, the clear cutting of properties without following protocol is something that we take very seriously. So in the future, please just make sure that you're following the protocols and the ordinance. And if you have to double check, just go ahead and do that.
I will definitely double check.
Thank you. All right.
Spread the word.
Moving on, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, it's Halcyon or
Housing.
Halcyon Builders, 4 Rutgers Drive.
I still have to see it before, I'm just really here to make sure. Any other questions?
Sure. Does anyone have any other questions after seeing the report from Samuel?
I do not.
Does anyone have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Allison, do I have a roll call?
We're approving his appeal.
Yes.
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 To grant the permit.
Members, Commissioner Keith,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
McHugh. Matt,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you for your patience during this process.
Just again, for you guys, benefit, I'm going to set this, obviously the engineers, the experts report speaks directly to the 14.8 alternative measures and substantial economic hardship. So I'm going to include that in the resolution for the applicant, as your reasoning.
Okay, new business, moving along, finance, Councilwoman Neff.
Not much to add beyond what we've already discussed on the budget here. I would expect that the finance committee will be busy looking at some of, the costs related to the proposed buildings to be constructed and some other large potential capital expenses this year. So to your point, Councilwoman Cole, I think we will be looking not only to understand the total cost of what we would like to take on this year, but also what it would mean for average resident on a monthly basis. And also what will be the cost for raising, essentially issuing debt this year. So I would imagine that's what we're gonna be busy with. Just a couple shout outs. I wanted to give a shout out to the Shade Tree Commission. They've been incredibly busy and they have done a fantastic job since last year and putting together an agenda of some fairly important items. Among the, maybe I'll just mention 3 things they're doing. The tree ordinance, which has already been mentioned, spent a lot of time coming up with what are the principles that we would like to see to improve tree ordinance that we have in place today. And it's now with our attorney, Greg Penna, for development of the ordinance. They are working on a tree inventory proposal and looking at potential vendors that would help us and come up with a tree inventory for our town. And I think that's a very important initiative. There may be some costs associated with it that we're gonna have to look at in the future, but it's a way for us to understand the canopy that we currently have and how we want to improve it. Lots of time spent on that. Also, there is a very neat plan right now to plant some new trees along Fairhaven Road. And the idea is to identify what properties could use the tree along Fairhaven Road. And essentially see if about 10 homes will be willing to plant those trees with the help of the Shade Tree Commission. The initial thought is that it will be cherry trees, so they will match the cherry trees of the fields. But that's sort of the beginning of maybe launching the Shaker Commission as a commission that will be focusing on replanting and replenishing our canopy.
Same side of the street or either side?
On either side, we've looked at aerial maps that show where there are some gaps. When you look at, at the, along Fairhaven Road from Ridge all the way to River. And potential areas where we could plant. The idea is to really make this a community project and ask residents whether they would like to participate and have a tree in their front yard. And find a way to buy these trees in bulk and have maybe the Shaker Commission fund them or have the residents partially fund and so on. But hopefully this will be done this year. I think it's a really neat project. And the idea was that maybe we'll start with cherry trees, but we might expand into others. But beyond that, really, like I said, move from this point towards the idea, the notion of maybe replanting some of the canopy that has been lost. Because we can keep always adding trees to Fairhaven Fields, but it's really where we've lost trees is where some homes that might have been expanded or construction, and really find what might be residents that might be interested in rebuilding that canopy and work together to accomplish that. So I just really wanted to give them a shout out on that. Just one last one on the land use committee, and Councilwoman Koch, I don't know if you make any further comments on that, but I also wanted to thank the members of that land use committee. They have put in a tremendous amount of hours to come up with a recommendation for changes in our zoning ordinances that is going to be going to the planning board for review. And this is meant to be, as we spoke last year, the idea is to see where we want to make improvements over the short term, medium term, and long term, and come up with some goals that are achievable. And what's coming to the planning board is that first set of goals that were identified as, these are the ones that we think we can do this year. So just wanted to mention that, because that a lot of volunteer hours have gone into that.
Councilwoman Neff. Personnel, Councilwoman Chris McKee.
I'm going to start with Natural Area Committee, just briefly. The meeting that's is typically going to be next week is going to be on the 24th via Zoom. For anybody who wants to join the Natural Area Committee meeting. Personnel has been really busy. We have some appointments on the consent agenda tonight. We've been reviewing non-aligned compensations and salaries and duties and responsibilities. And there are also contract negotiations going on. So personnel has been pretty busy this time of year.
Moving along, planning and zoning, Councilwoman Koch.
Well, to piggyback on Councilwoman Neff, our next planning board meeting is tomorrow night at 7:30. At that point, work referenced by Councilwoman Neff will be presented to the planning board. It will be a series of short-term goals and some suggested modifications and changes to existing ordinances. Our next zoning board meeting is on April 7th, and that will be at 7:15. Both meetings are currently scheduled for Zoom. And then on rec, Councilwoman Chris McKee and I have some great news, is that the father-daughter dance and the mother-son dance are coming back. The father-daughter dances will take place on Friday, April 8th and Saturday, April 9th from 7 to 9:30. The grades have changed a little bit this year to accommodate those students who missed out during the pandemic. So these dances will be targeted for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Information can be found on the Borough on the rec website, as well as various communication mediums. Registration for these events will open on March 16th, which is Wednesday. So it's the day after tomorrow. The mother-son dances will take place on Friday, May 6th and Saturday, May 7th. Saturday, May 7th is turning out to be a busy day. There's a lot going on.
You can fishing, you can fish, you can shop, and you can dance.
Yeah,
That's a-
and
that's a
there's
day right
something,
there.
and there's something
That's a
else
full day.
on that day. But anyway, these will take place on Friday and Saturday. On Saturday, May 7th, again, targeting students in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. All events will take place at the Raven and the Peach. And again, for this dance, the registration will open on March 23rd. And we have several spring events coming up. The Easter egg hunt is on Saturday, April 9th at 9 o'clock in McCarter Park. The opening day parade will take place or start at 10 o'clock.
Baseball.
Yes,
Baseball.
all happening on, in McCarter Park on April 9th. Easter egg hunt at 9, the baseball day parade on, at 10 a.m. Then we have the father-daughter dances, the mother-son dance, the fishing derby will take place on May 7th. And we have a Memorial Day parade coming up on Monday, May 30th, and that will be at 9 o'clock. And that is it for.
Maybe we'll have fireworks this summer, maybe.
Maybe, we'll see.
Mayor, if I could just for 1 second, as it relates to the 2 spring dance events for the students, despite the names, anybody is welcome to attend. There was some discussion at the rec committee level about potentially adjusting the name. The rec committee decided ultimately not to, and so those dances are proceeding in that fashion.
But all are welcome.
I'd like to make a comment as well. I think that if that's okay, Mayor.
Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, sir. I think inclusivity is critical in this community. It's something that I think we all agree on. There's no boundaries there. I had heard about a potential change in the name or even the function of the dance in terms of merging it, making it all genders and all parents and so forth. So, down the road, I think, those are important things to consider, though we do respect the decision of the rec committee and the sovereignty of their decision-making process. It's something I hope we can consider down the road.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman McHugh, are you?
Yep,
All right, police, fire, office emergency management, engineering, and DPW.
sure. On the police fire OEM front, for the public's knowledge, we, as a governing body, just conducted interviews to fill the lieutenant position to take over who is now Captain Townsend's previous position. Governing body is just a percentage of the overall factor for this, but we have 2 great candidates who will fill that role. Also on the police and somewhat OEM front, in Central Monmouth County, we will be conducting, not necessarily the governing body, but along with the chief's guidance and leadership in all the surrounding towns, active shooter drill in our school. This is certainly a threat all around the country. And for one, with the military history and terrorism awareness and all this stuff, I think we're lucky that the surrounding towns come to our town to conduct this training for familiarity. And that will be taking place the 21st. And I'd like to open it up to see if the chief would like to add any details to that.
Yeah, it's on the evening of the 21st. We're just doing an active threat drill at Norwood. We're in partnership with 13 other towns in Monmouth County Central, and we'll all be participating in the drill. We'll be the first one in the central region since COVID. So we're the first ones for it. And we do about 12 a year in different towns.
Right, and happy to hear that Fairhaven is leading the way with this on all fronts, safety for our children. For DPW engineering, we continue to look at the projects in the queue, trying to keep up the operational tempo for infrastructure in our town. And also, Councilwoman Cole, would you like to add anything on that front?
No, that's, we'll expect to perhaps see some beginning of some road work, not the actual construction, but some of those initial steps happen over the summer. And of course, we'll be making sure neighborhoods that will be impacted down the road after that would be advised. And the only other thing, Councilman McHugh, would be an assessment of the DPW capacity for taking care of what we have, looking ahead on the horizon, what may be added to the workload, and what is the actual capacity of DPW to continue to function and maintain our many treasures. So that is something we have in paper, and I anticipate we'll be talking about at our next meeting.
Right. How can we provide the best services for our residents? Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman McHugh. We all hope that you feel better.
Yeah.
Councilman
Thank you.
Rodriguez?
Thank you. I'm going to brief on two things. We did a facilities committee last week. We also had a brush committee where Councilwoman Koch and I chaired that. I'll do that second so she can jump in on that. As far as facilities are concerned, we've been making significant progress on getting bid specs pulled together so they could be presented to the council. We also discussed the project labor agreement concept, which I think we'll also do a little bit of discussion here at some point. We reviewed the timeline, which remains unchanged from what we put out a week or 2 weeks ago, though that may move around a little bit. Eli, our architect, Goldstein, is finalizing the last details so we can get our bid specs pulled together. We can do a bond ordinance if we are falling short, based on what you view as wants versus needs in facilities projects, and hopefully go to bid this spring or summer. One last thing, I'm trying to work with Tracy to get her into a facilities committee so she can see what goes on and learn a little bit more firsthand, which may happen in the next meeting depending on schedules. And then the brush committee, we met last Monday night, I think.
Yes.
Seems like a year ago. Oh, it was just last Monday night. It was fairly well attended. Not everybody was able to make it, but most of the folks who have been serving on the brush committee and continue to be involved attended. Mike Cannon had gathered up a bunch of information about the most recent processing that we did in the fall. He represents the district where the brush site is. For the most part on par, it was successful based on the recommendations that the council had put in place. Not everything was perfect. We did lose the tub grinder and had to pull it out and bring it back. And there was a bunch of logistics there, and we lucked out a little bit in terms of the foot traffic in the park. We could learn some lessons there, but for the most part, cutting the trucks down to very few and also having them abide by the time schedule. We dragged it out much longer, but it was a far less, seemed to be far less impact on the community. Councilwoman, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you captured the spirit of the meeting and the fact that, as represented by Mr. Cannon, overall, the residents that were impacted in that neighborhood have seen definitely an improvement. And I think we did them a great service.
I think if it's all right, Mayor, I think we should keep it together as a committee. I think there was a little bit of confusion about serving on the committee, but I do think as we try to continue to improve that, this is a good body to go back to on an ad hoc basis, maybe one more time this year, to see if additional improvements and other things can be had and get their feedback.
Absolutely. And if there's members of the committee that have other requirements in their daily lives and they can't make it, we can replace them with other eager members as well. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Cole.
Certainly, Mayor. So outreach and communications, we're gonna have to skip a meeting. We have some folks going on vacation, well-deserved vacations. So our next meeting is gonna be on the 23rd. We are gonna be continuing our work in discussions around protocols, communications, all with an eye to facilitating volunteer involvement and streamlining interacting with the central office and cross collaboration amongst the various committees, boards, and commissions throughout the borough, all of which are comprised of volunteers. We are also waiting on a proposal for some improvements for this room for technology for meetings, land use, commission meetings, and the council meeting. Allison and I will tag up and see what we can bring back to the council next time. The Environmental Commission has met and continues to work very hard. They had 2 guests, which I must say were impressive. One, Amanda Brockwell, formerly with Mom Conservation Foundation, who's now with NJAC, joined us to learn a little bit about us. We shared some project ideas. We anticipate working more closely with NJAC moving forward. We were also joined by Bob Schuster. Brian Rice gets credit for really reactivating the Navasink Municipal Commission, which is towns who live on the river and are guided by how we can improve the health of the river. And Mr. Schuster gave us a fairly in-depth view of the condition of the Navasink. Mix of good news and bad news. The Environmental Commission is going to prepare a summary with the findings and the maps now be available on the website. Long and short of it is we still remain, they measure the health of the river by the shellfish and whether or not you can grow shellfish in the Navasink, which is, this is the way it's measured. And we're still in prohibited waters down here at our end. There is a little bit of light. There happen to be some areas that continue to fall, new areas that become deemed prohibitive, which is not the direction we want to go. But Mr. Schuster was able to tell us there are some pockets of improvement that now go up to qualifying for shellfish, which means the actions that we're taking collectively are making an improvement. And so the thinking is that we maybe come up with a way to what you can do, and in our case for Fairhaven, it's probably going to mean making sure you pick up your dog waste, but they're all little things and they add up. And if we can keep it from going in the river and keep our catchments clean and continue to make those small improvements all along the Navasink, then hopefully sooner than later, we will no longer have prohibited waters. But that information will be available on the website as soon as the summary is prepared. The Green Team is organized and is hosting a composting workshop at Bicentennial Hall at 7 p.m. on May 2nd, yet another thing for May. And the Love Where You Live celebration is going to be at Bicentennial Hall on May 14th. And just a quick note on outreach and communication, there is a lot going on, and between rec and the garden club and the plant sale and the yards of what I've been collecting this as best I can, catch cat, but Betty Ann is phenomenal. She is the retention entity for all of this kind of information. So look for constant contact and information where where you'll be able to see everything all in one thread. We'll try to catch it all. I'm sure hopefully we won't miss anything, but if it does, we'll catch it for next year. The business district hosted its annual networking event at the Knights of Columbus. So thank you to the Knights of Columbus. They are currently undergoing a survey process amongst the business district. And I think they're trying to consider how they can play the most meaningful role for the district as a whole, and looking to encourage members, anyone who's interested in joining. You can talk to me or Michelle or Tom Bull, really any local business person will help you keep them in touch. And the last thing I would say is just to reinforce what Councilwoman Neff said. I look forward to seeing the Shade Tree Commission's recommendations. Councilwoman Neff and I have been working closely with them, and it's out of committee over into our capable municipal attorney's hands. And in time, I'm sure not long, we'll have it here at the council for your consideration. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cole.
Mayor, we have a meeting on the 23rd to go back through the ordinance. So we're going to have a draft and then we're going to go back to the committee. Hopefully we'll get something together to bring back to the governing body.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. we're talking resolutions 2022-71 through 2022-77. I do want to point out that 2022-76, there's an amended resolution on the dais. That is to amend the temporary budget. Does anyone have any questions on the consent agenda before we move? Anyone have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with the amended temporary budget in 22-26.
Second.
Allison, may I
Excuse me?
please have a roll call? Yes.
I
Thank you.
was, Mayor, thank you. I was going to ask if we could pull 2021-73 for a separate vote.
2021-73.
Yes.
That's appoint DPW foreman David Carl and James O'Brien. We can do that. Correct? Yeah, we can build. So why don't we start with consent agenda resolutions? I'll be looking for a motion from someone to vote on 2022-71 through 72, and then 74 through 77, with 76 being amended.
So moved.
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Chris McKee,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
McHugh,
Yes.
Neff,
Yeah,
Rodriguez.
Yes.
And now I'm looking for a motion to vote on 2021-73 to appoint a DPW foreman, David Carl and James O'Brien. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
If I may just make a comment on this real
Sure.
quick, Mayor.
Absolutely.
We can have a second and then do the discussion. Let's get the second.
Okay. Okay. Councilman?
All right, thank you. So I just wanted to provide some back story and history to this. This recommendation was made last year. Started in the committee process, which we love that, or which we have championed for efficiency, so we don't have all the committees happening in every meeting. The committee, the DPW committee, did not recommend or support the director's recommendation. Former councilwoman with a long history in the HR department had concerns about the process. The director then went back and drafted a rating scale that supported his original recommendation. As a teacher, I know parents wouldn't agree with if I gave their kid a grade and then provided a rubric after the fact to support that grade. I found it alarming that the job description change for the streets department was the only department where a change was proposed, but a job description didn't change for our building maintenance technician when we have two huge facility projects in the works. I propose keeping our current foremans and set up an evaluation process similar to what took place today for the police department for any future changes and recommendations from the director of public works.
Can I just get a point of information? The like the rubric that you're referring to that was about a page long, I thought that that was prepared in connection with the process.
That was an ad hoc after the fact of the concerns of the process. So the director went back and made that to support his original recommendation.
That was back in last year, you know, when your former councilwoman co-chair had suggested that he approach it in that fashion.
Right, because it had not been approached in that fashion before he made his recommendation.
Right,
But this year was a different posting with a different description, and the rubric was in place prior to the interviews for this year, just so I'm clear on the facts. Is that accurate?
That's not my understanding at all.
So when was the rubric, are you suggesting the rubric was created last year or this year?
well,
I guess I'm
it
confused.
was it was last year because it was prior to Councilwoman Cole being, brought onto the governing body.
It was created after the former councilwoman with a demonstrated history in HR had concerns about the process. And it was created after the recommendation was made. So the director went back and kind of
Recommendation
created this
last,
scale.
I'm sorry, the recommendation last year or the recommendation this year?
This has been going on, I believe, since late November, the recommendation, and it's been in committee. As you're aware, Councilwoman, I made a recommendation because of the process. I thought that the Personnel Committee should also look at this. And we.
Right, but my
we waited-
understanding is this was an annual appointment and the posting went up in January. Am I mistaken about this?
No, it went up probably in, I'm gonna say November. I'd have to go back and look
Okay,
because it was originally to be appointed for January 1st.
to be appointed January 1st, okay.
And I'd have to,
I'm sorry,
Councilwoman
has the
Cade,
personnel committee looked at this? I do remember that.
Well, we did, but I guess Councilman McHugh's suggestion is that the rubric was created after the interviews when the governing body had concerns. I'm just learning this for the first time, so I guess there's a confusion on the timeline of facts here.
Yeah, I don't recall it.
I gotta be honest, I don't care when the rubric was created. I truly don't. We have a recommendation from a professional that's saying that based on this year's appointment, these individuals are the employees that are best situated to be efficient for the borough.
I
To me,
understand,
that's
yeah.
all it comes down to.
I understand, and I can speak on behalf of, the posting itself, there's an annual appointment for this foreman role. The description of the foreman role has changed from past descriptions. There's a process and, to apply and interview and submit for it, and it's an annual appointment. That's in addition to your typical duties and responsibilities.
If I may, just piggyback off the mayor's comments real quick, Councilwoman.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mayor, I totally agree. Very similar to how the chief makes a recommendation with his staff. I think that should weigh heavily, but the process is that the council has a say. And while we should take into consideration, we should also be an independent body and have our own opinions and weigh that accordingly. Thank you, Councilman. Go ahead if you had a comment.
Councilman, absolutely, and I would never discount your opinion. I guess what I'm saying is I don't necessarily feel that I would personally have expertise to override the borough engineer, who's the director of the DPW, and he's in there every single day dealing with all of these employees, and he knows what's needed to achieve the tasks that they need to achieve for the borough. So in this process, I don't want to get into details, obviously, but I haven't heard a specific argument that leads me to think that anything other than the appointment that's being made here is what's in the best interest of Fairview. And that's the only reason that I have my position. There's no other reason. I think the department is shorthanded as it is, which makes it even more important that we're getting the most out of what we can get from the employees there. And if we have our professional telling us that this is the right path to go with, unless there's other information that I'm not aware of, I think we've discussed this one enough. I think we'd be ready to vote on it.
I sent everything related to this. I request to the Personnel Committee on January 25th, every document that went along with this.
Yes, and the personnel committee did review it, yes. The information about the timeline was new information. The mayor's point is whether it's, was the timeline or wasn't, doesn't make a difference for him. But Betsy and I on personnel did look at the circumstances and vet it, and we looked at the posting, we looked at.
And you're okay
the free-
with the personnel committee is okay with this document?
Yes.
Correct, yes. And largely, this is a recommendation that's come from the borough engineer and Mr. Krasinski.
You ready for roll call?
Sure, I think we need a second on the
I think we-
motion.
We have a
have one?
Oh, you got
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
okay.
Allison, may we please have a roll call?
Councilmembers Krasinski,
Yes,
Paul,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
McCure,
Nope.
Matt,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
No.
Moving on to department reports, 2020 annual report, zoning board of adjustment, 2021 annual report, tax collector, February 2022 municipal clerk, dog report, planning board, municipal court, tax collector, budget status. Motion to accept the reports as submitted.
motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, before we move on to the good of the borough, I just want to point out that this time a year ago, I was dropping my kids off at school, and they had a mask, and they had a shield, and they looked like an alien going into the school. And just a month ago, we couldn't even sit in these chambers together. So I feel a little bit like Andy Dufresne right now, that all of Fairhaven and the entire world has crawled through 5 football fields of sewage to get to the other side. And I'm so thankful that we're here. I would like to say that we feel very lucky to be here, but there are some people on the other side of the world that have their own sewage going on right now. So I just want to put some positive thoughts out there and say that I'm really hopeful that that ends as soon as possible, that conflict, and they can have some equivalent feelings. So thank you. With that, we're going to move on to good of the borough. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please observe a time limit of 3 minutes if at all possible. Is there anyone?
Mayor, if I could start us off.
Sure.
Thank you. I just want to go back to a conversation I raised before. Betsy and I both serve as liaisons on the rec committee. I was very excited at the most recent rec meeting when our rec director, DJ Breckenridge, announced that we were anticipating the spring dance events and that everybody feel comfortable proceeding in light of COVID. That discussion ensued and everyone felt comfortable proceeding. I then raised the idea of suggesting that we change the name of the events, largely because the names that are existing are suggestive that a certain gender of child must be paired with a certain category of parent in order to attend. And while for many people in our community, that is not a thought that will cross their mind, there are both children and families in our community that will, by the very name of the event, feel excluded, marginalized, unable to attend, and like they cannot participate. And it is a difficult task to be a volunteer, to put yourself out there and realize that the decisions you're making are not necessarily about you or your family or your values, but what is best for your community. And that means every single person in your community, all of the children, all of the families. And so I thought it was really important that we renamed the event. And I was disheartened to learn that there are community members who felt that it needed to remain the same, and that they felt very strongly about it. And I was upset because I realized that it was going to impact people in our community negatively. The committee made their decision. I want to thank Lauren Porter, who made a really great suggestion of the name Dance With Me, me being a child, and they could choose any adults to attend with them. So I realized the committee had a very short period of time within which to plan these events. And so, you know, with that in mind, I'm hopeful that with more advanced planning and forethought, that in future years, we will be able to come up with a name that does not include the gender of the child or the category of the adult, because it does exclude people in our community. We have families in our community where you have single parents, you have families in our community where one parent has passed away, you have families in our community where the other parent is unavailable. You have families in our community with same-sex parents, you have non-binary children. And so it would really be wonderful if nobody felt they could not attend or would not attend simply based on the name of the event. And I am hopeful that that will happen in the future, so.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Sherman Borough, 492 River Road. Sorry, this is very emotional. My wife and Amanda and I have 3 kids, Ben in 7th grade, Hildy in 4th grade, and Iggy in kindergarten. I love this borough. We've been here since 2014, and I'm truly grateful for the life that my children have here. Because of that, I volunteered immensely in this community. I joined rec soccer, and at a time when it was almost bankrupt, put it on as treasurer, put it on sound financial footing, and it runs well now. I was Cub Master, Fairhaven Path 127 for years, and every opening night of Fairhaven Fair, you will find me at the duck pond, making sure that those kids believe that they were the lucky ones who found that little duck and really deserved to win that stuffed animal. But there is a pair of events in this town that my child, Hildy, cannot attend, just simply by the name of it. Hildy is non-binary, so that means they use they, them pronouns, and they do not identify as a son or a daughter. And so by naming these events, the mother-son dance and the father-daughter dance, they feel excluded. It is not a decision that I make. It is not a decision that my wife Amanda makes. We would happily take them to either event of their choosing. But they look at those names, they sit there and they go, that's not for me, I can't go. That doesn't mean that Hildy doesn't like to dress up. I can show you pictures of the times that they've dressed up in suits and outfits, ready to go out, fancy, but this is an event that they cannot attend. Obviously, the ship has sailed for this year, right? And I am not asking rec committee to do anything else. They made the decisions that they could based on the information that they can, and I respect and value the volunteers who do that very difficult job, right? It all takes time, and I appreciate that. But I'm here to ask the governing body to reiterate its commitment to inclusivity, real inclusivity in this town, and that we direct the rec committee next year to take the steps to understand what that means. Have a public process, ask people for comments, and then once that process has happened, then let them make the decisions. Right? I don't feel that happened this year. I wish it had, and I would truly appreciate your support in letting that process happen next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherman. Anybody else?
I can't say anything after that, but I am in a sort of similar situation with one of my kids who,
Jess.
oh, yeah, Jess.
And state your name. Yeah.
Jess Patel, sorry, 205 Fairhaven. I have a son who is gender creative. That's what he's a boy, he identifies as a boy, but he's gender creative, and he kind of goes with the girls. He dresses up in dresses, and his entire community of peers is girls. So when I asked him, and actually he can't go this year anyway, he's a 2nd grader. I didn't realize that. I just saw the flyer today, so I didn't realize that it was just 4th, 5th, and 6th. So I have potentially some time to hope for a little bit of forward motion in this way for him. But I want him to be able to go and enjoy these moments, whether it's with me or with my husband, where he can go and be himself and be with the people who he considers to be his people. And in his case, it will be the girls. So again, it's not every kid falls into a box where they're a boy and they're gonna go with their mom or vice versa. So I think that if we could have a more public discussion about this, and I think the rec committee does a great job. I've been to the stands before. I had a great time. It's a beautiful event and it's really fun for the kids and it's really fun for the parents. But I want to be able to go with all my kids, not just the ones who sort of fit the mold. And I just have to say that this isn't a political talking point. So I'm sorry that I have to address it because I heard some comments under the breath. This is not about politics. This is about including all the children who live in this community and the parents as well. So.
Thank you, Jess. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
I have come to ask for dispensation from the council. I have been considering for,
I need a definition there. I'm sorry. What does that mean, dispensation? I'm serious.
I would like to, there are rules of zoning and planning that are set by the council and are enforced by the zoning and the planning boards. And I have gone to, I guess it was the zoning board or whatever. I want to put a second curb cut in front of my house. I live on River Road. I've lived there for more than 50 years. And I can testify that there's a lot more traffic out there. And the town knows it because they keep lowering the speed limit, but that doesn't eliminate the traffic. There are two houses I know of on my street that have second curb cuts. One is only 50 foot wide, and the other one I think is 75. Mine is 73. The ordinance says that you have to have 150 foot frontage before you are entitled to a second curb cut. I applied and talked to Sandy, and she said, you've got it. She gave me like 23 pages of regulations. And one of them is I have to produce a survey of my property. I don't have a survey of my property. I've lived there so long. What they used at the time was the builder's plot plan. That's what I got. So I'm not going to pay $1,000 for a survey of my property to put in a second curb cut, which is technically in the right of way anyhow. It's going to be part of Streetscape West, which is on the books, it's moving ahead. And I want to do this in conjunction with Streetscape West, simply because it's easier. They're going to get out there with the cement and they're going to put down the curbs and whatever. I just want a second curb cut. That's all I want. I don't want to do a survey of my property. I don't want to give you $1,200 to make an application. So I would like, in the Catholic Church, I think they call it the dispensation, to say that I can have my, I called Freehold and I talked to the engineering department out there. And I told him the whole story. I live on River Road, it's a busy road. They're doing Streetscape West. He says all the borough engineer has to do is put a check mark or something on the plans, and that's it. So I think it is cumbersome, onerous, and ridiculous under the circumstances to expect me to go through all this. I mean, my house is not involved. Why do I need to survey? I'm not moving anything. I'm not adding. I'm not tearing anything down. All I want is a second curb cut. And the council who made the rule is the only one who can change it. So that's what I'm asking. I'm asking to be allowed to have a second curb cut without going through all the rigmarole that is now required.
So have you asked planning and zoning? Have
Yes.
you gone through the process and been denied?
No, they have simply said that they can't change it because the borough council made the rule. And the borough council is the only one who can change it.
Well, I don't think we're going to fundamentally change a rule just based on the fact that you want a second curb cut. But if you, specific to your situation, apply for that curb cut and they deny it, I think you can appeal it or ask for a variance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
By the time I do all that, it will have come and gone, and I will have to do a curb cut as a separate, I will destroy the new curbs. The other thing being, I'm not laying out $1,200. That's ridiculous to get this thing on any kind of agenda. I think that you are over administrated You are overregulated and you don't, you don't,
County's not.
pardon me?
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Well, I'll also point out, the Catholic Church charges a lot more for special dispensation. It's a county road, so I think you need county planning board.
Well, you've already got the
Which is the
plans
reason
that you're
you're there
doing
to begin.
Streetscape West.
We
We already know.
the county's not putting in the curb and sidewalks, the borough is putting in curb and sidewalks. I'm gonna yield to the borough attorney here, but it is an ordinance and the governing body would ultimately either, she would actually to get a variance,
Yeah.
or the governing body would need to change the ordinance. But before you change the ordinance, you change it for everybody, and there's a
Right.
reason why they want the second curve cut, the size of the property, because they envision it being, I imagine, some sort of circular driveway.
Yeah, there's a reason the ordinance is on the books, and going back to what I said before, again, I don't personally feel I have the expertise to override something like that, and that's why I think it needs
Mayor,
to go.
pardon me, I go a step further, you guys don't have the authority to override that.
So,
Would you, I mean, I
You
reckon,
did it, but you can't undo it, is that what you're telling
well,
me?
you can undo it, but you'd have to undo it for
The entire
zone
ordinance.
or town.
Well, it's
Would you
discriminatory.
I'm sorry.
It's discriminatory at this point anyhow, because there are people on other streets that have circular driveways, but they don't have to go through this because they don't have curbs. There's nothing, there's
So
no
there's,
curb.
I'll give you some advice. I think you can go, and I know it's a long application, it's like 18 pages long, but you can check off waiver on anything you'd like there. And the board can grant it under certain circumstances. So for example, you're exiting onto a county road. I'm not sure if that requires county planning board approval. That would be something that the land use board could not waive for you, right? You have to go, it's county, it's not our jurisdiction. It's the county's jurisdiction if you get to exit on their roads. But you could check off on that form waiver for the survey or anything. I know they ask you for a lot of stuff, but they ask you for about 65 items worth of stuff. But you can check waiver and write in the notes, and the board can grant waivers for some of those things. So it might not cost you as much money as it appears on its face. And then you could throw as many of those in as you want. So if it gets rejected, it comes back to you. You have a certain time to appeal, you could do another one. So I would recommend, obviously, your situation on a major road, you want to turn around so you can see who's coming at you when you're pulling out. Might be something they might grant a waiver on. It's not something that this body has the authority to grant a waiver on automatically without changing the whole ordinance for everyone in town. But the land use board can help you in that regard in certain circumstances. Obviously, you can't waive statutory or county regulations, but they can certainly help you on the nuts and bolts of traffic and things like that. They can waive those for you.
But they have already set precedent on River Road. Across from me at 502 River, he's got a circular driveway. And also 693 River Road, and their lot is only 50 foot.
So it's
Well,
like
my
that
point
they
too
went
is
through the
that those are the reasons for the waiver, right? So it's already in your zone, it's already happening. There are certain items on that checklist that when you check it off, you're gonna check waiver, site conditions or obvious given next door neighbor, things like that. And they can grant you dispensation on that to lower the costs and things like that. But you have to ask for it, you have to check off waiver on the
It
list.
shouldn't cost me anything because Streetscape West is already in the book. All he has to do is check off one more curb cut. It's not special, they already know what.
The ordinance though does deem it that it is special. That's the issue. So, and it's not, the precedent you're right, it has been said that if you do it and it doesn't conform to the ordinance, you have to go get the waiver, which is likely what those other curb cuts did. They went through the process, they paid the money, they asked for the waiver, it was probably approved. No one here is saying that we don't want you to get the curb cut. We're just saying, much like we were talking about the trees before, you got to follow the process, how the ordinance is set.
Well, I think you should simplify the process. I think you guys have got to step back and look at the fact that Fairhaven's only like 1.5 miles square. It's not Middletown. It's not Hackensack. You're a small town, and I just think you overregulated. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Anyone else? You want to see if anyone's on the owl or? You want to see if anyone's on the owl or no?
I have two hands up right now, sir.
Let's wait, no, let's wait.
The first one is Aaron Howard.
Hi, Aaron.
Aaron, you can unmute yourself.
Hi,
Go ahead and
guys.
speak.
Hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Oh, yay. Okay, I'm Erin Howard, 285 Dartmouth. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person, but I really appreciate the Zoom option for those of us with little kids and partners who are in the city. It makes it possible for us to attend. So thank you for the hybrid model. I am very happy to see so many events returning. Thank you, Mayor, for your work on Fairhaven Day. And I'm super excited about the Love Where You Live. And I'm also very excited about the dances. I just wanted to say that I really support the conversation around considering a new name. I have watched as these dances have returned to friends across the country, many with alternate names, which I just believe is much more inclusive for all members. I heard my two friends who gave very good reasoning around their personal reasons for inclusion. There are many families in Fairhaven that don't look like mom, dad, son, daughter. We have many single parent households here, and our community continues to change. I would appreciate next year that we continue this discussion and see if there is a name that could be more inclusive to all in the community, to not leave anyone out. I do appreciate that the note on the flyer that was sent out that does say that it's open for all, so open to all. So thank you for that. And thank you, Rec Committee, for your work and for having the discussion. That's all.
Thank you, Aaron.
And there now I have Mike S.
Good, Mike.
Mike, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Mike Sena, 39 Lake Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We
sir.
can, yes.
Hi, I guess this is for the chief. I saw your letter online about the rash of car thefts. And my neighbor across the street was hit a couple. He got his Range Rover stolen about 6, 7, 8 weeks ago. My question is there a county task force or is there anybody in the state? Is there a state task force working on this? It seems to happen. Go ahead.
There absolutely is. There's a county task force and a state task force that we're actually part of throughout the state, because as you know, it's not just Fairhaven, it's all over the state.
Right. So have they made any progress?
Well, there's progress, but I really can't discuss it in an open meeting here. So you want to give me a call, I'll be happy to discuss it.
All right. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Anybody else from the public? If you have a question, raise your hand.
Yes. Teresa.
Good evening, Lisa Center, 39 Lake Avenue. I just want to commend the mayor and council for their solidarity with the people of Ukraine. It's heartfelt. We have a lot of heartfelt issues tonight, and everyone is very compassionate. And I think that's to be commended regarding any political affiliation. I applaud everyone. And I would like to ask the council and mayor if you would consider a resolution in support of the people of Ukraine at this very, very troubling time for the entire world. So thank you again, and God bless.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that's a very good idea. Perhaps the next agenda could include a resolution, a simple statement of
Certainly
support and
something we can
solidarity.
discuss.
Yes.
Anyone else? And we're good, Teresa, on
Yes, sir. There's no other hands raised.
Councilwoman Neff.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Jess Patel's and Shervin's comments and requests with regards to consideration for potential changes to to the mother and son dance and the father and daughter dance. I think those dances are wonderful. Those events are really beautiful. We do reflect a lot of tradition. But as we go forward, it is important to make sure that we modernize them as need be and make sure that everyone is included. I do agree there are a lot of single parents or children with a parent who might not be alive. They would also be, might feel that they might be excluded from this event. The other thing I would mention, and that's a feedback that I already provided in the past, and I think improvements have been made, is that in the mother and son dance, whenever there are speakers, they tend to, each one of them talk about what sports they do, and that they were the captain of a sport, of a team, and so on. And I think there's an overemphasis on sports. So I also wanted to make the request that if you do have speakers in any of the events, or whatever the events might turn out to be for next year, I hope you move forward with some consideration for changes that, either in this or any other set of events, that we look for a broader set of skills and talents. And that if we have, for example, students who are invited from Fairhaven to speak with middle schoolers, that we have representation from different talents, not just a sports focus conversation, because there are children who have other talents and other interests, and I think it's important for us to also consider that. So just I would say, I guess in general, just support the idea of making sure that we are modernizing the event as need be, that we're inclusive, and we also take into consideration a broader set of talents in our community.
Thank you, Councilman.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I don't know if they still have speakers anymore. It used to be with the
They might have
brunch.
eliminated it.
So they have eliminated that component because they went from a mother-son brunch to a mother-son dance.
Yes.
But I would also like to say, in the light of all of the conversations regarding the naming of the dance, I think DJ has really done a great job of trying to keep it together for this year. I've seen the flyers that have gone out to the schools. I think he was really trying to make it as inclusive as possible under the constraints of the name. And the rec commission, the rec committee is looking forward to having this conversation about the naming of the dance in the future for the next year, for 23.
I'll just say, I feel a little slightly more removed from the conversation that had started, but since we've heard from everyone else, it seems to me a conversation has been started within the community, and that it's around a tradition, which is something that shouldn't be lost. I think at the end of the day, we should be guided by kindness. And I truly believe that with the appropriate amount of time, traditions guided by kindness, seems to me this came up last minute for this event. If I'm picking up all the timing.
Came up last minute. We really didn't decide that same meeting that we had decided to have, the same meeting we decided to have the event is when we discussed the name. Yeah.
So I'm just sensitive to the fact that there's a long standing tradition, but I've always seen in the collective mindset of Fairhaven folks, they're guided by kindness, and I trust that will ultimately lead us in the right direction.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good. All right. Okay. We are going to move towards executive session. We're going to continue that. Formal action will not be taken. 9:38 p.m.
Wow.
Motion. Second.